I'm going to fake my death.
Where have you decided to live when it's all calmed down?
Next door!
An unbelievably true story.
The worst is over now, pet. I promise you.
The Thief, His Wife and the Canoe. Watch the full series now on ITV Hub or ad-free on BritBox.
Hello once again, you're watching our election special here on UTV. We're joined by Jonathan Buckley from the DUP, from the Alliance Party, the MP Stephen Farry, Matthew O'Toole from the SDLP and John Stewart from the Ulster Unionist Party. We hope that John O'Dowd from Sinn Féin will be joining us by Zoom shortly. To start with you, Matthew O'Toole, where did it go wrong for you?
For the SDLP, well, it was a very bad election for the SDLP, Paul. I don't think there's any spin or deflection from that, and we're very bruised today. We've lost some genuinely amazing public servants, particularly Nicola Mallon, someone who's given her life to social justice, to North Belfast and to our party. But where it went wrong, basically, is that we were squeezed on two flanks, essentially. There was a huge move towards, for some voters, as it were on our two flanks, nationalist voters towards Sinn Féin, in part because the DUP, I'm afraid, and other unionist parties, but particularly the DUP, very appallingly decided to cast out on whether they would serve under Sinn Féin.
Does it not beg the question?
On the other side,
does it not beg the question here, Matthew O'Toole?
Move towards the Alliance Party.
Does it not beg the question here? What is the point of the SDLP?
Well, I've been asked this question once today already, Paul. We did have a bad election, but the point of the SDLP is to fuse social democratic Labour politics with a proud constitutional aspiration. This was a very difficult election. There are people in our party who are very bruised right now, including myself. And the point of our party is to bring that fusion of centre-left politics and a constitutional aspiration to bring the people of this island together. That remains a very noble aspiration.
But maybe your day has gone in that sense.
Well, I don't think it has gone, Paul. We have two excellent MPs. We have 8 MLAs who've been returned to Stormont. Look, this has been a bruising election, but whenever you have bruising elections, when the tide doesn't go in your favour, the thing to do with your mandate is not to walk away in shame. Our party and our activists can hold their head high. The campaign that they ran and the positive message they brought. But yes, it was difficult.
And it wasn't a great election for the DUP either, Jonathan Buckley, was it?
Well, certainly, Paul, nobody likes to lose seats in an election, but I think given where we were, given what the polls were indicating, I think some commentators saying the DUP could be returned with as low as 18 seats. Today, we're
dealing with the reality, 25.
25 seats, and again, my sympathies with some great colleagues that have lost their seats, namely Mervyn Storey and Peter Weir. But look, the clear message for unionism in this election is divided unionism in 2022 cannot win elections. Let's look at North Antrim, for example. 4.2 unionist quotas, 3 unionist MLAs elected. Same with Strangford and same in East Antrim.
But that's the single transferable vote for you. That's how the system works.
Well, unionists must understand the system. We must work better together. If we're to maximise unionist representation, to deliver on the issues which matter to the people in this country.
So you're back to work on Monday in that case, are you?
Well, I haven't quit working, Paul, since I take my...
So you'll be signing in on Monday, will you, at Stormont?
I will be at Stormont with my MLA colleagues on Monday discussing what the implications are of this vote. And first and foremost, we have to deal with the reality. The DUP stood on a very clear mandate that the Northern Ireland Protocol must be...
That's immovable.
That is immovable.
Did you hear what the Secretary of State said there? Because he was nebulous about this.
Well, the Secretary of State has been all over the place from the get-go on the Northern Ireland Protocol, as has the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But what is clear is that unionism has delivered a mandate for the removal of the Northern Ireland Protocol. So it's for the Secretary of State now to say, what does he want? Does he want an executive? Or is he going to deal with the protocol?
But still a majority of people didn't vote for the removal of the protocol.
But the reality is, Paul, if we're to have sustainable long-term devolution in Northern Ireland, it must be based on mutual respect and also mutual consideration between both unionists and nationalists. If there is no consent among unionists for the
protocol, does that mean no government?
Has to be dealt with.
Does that mean that there will be no government?
What I say clearly is that if we do not deal with the protocol to begin with, we do not have a sustainable future for devolution.
Government, no government then?
Protocol must be dealt with, then we can form an executive.
That means until it is dealt with, you will not be in government. That means that Stormont can be mothballed.
The clear manifesto pledge from the DUP was that the protocol would be dealt with. Now, Under the legislation, there's 24 weeks in which executive ministers can still be in
24
place.
weeks, that's a lifetime for people. I mean, meanwhile, there are people who have difficulty in heating their homes, in eating, people on waiting lists, and we know that there is money in the system there that can be used. How do you address those people through all of this?
Absolutely, those issues can be dealt with front and centre. Ministers, as I say, are still in place in those departments. But what needs to be dealt with is the reality. The protocol is poisoning Northern Ireland politics. Let's get back to a sustainable future in which we can all have consent with it. And if we're going to deal with it, let's deal with it now for the long term.
It's been a good election, Stephen Farry, for Alliance. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Sure. You have more than doubled your seats in the Assembly. So what can you do, and your electorate, what can you do to help people like Jonathan Buckley?
Well, first of all, the Alliance success is a very big statement about a changing Northern Ireland. We have a very strong party that's based around cross-community progressive values. We're not defined by the constitutional question. It's all about delivery on practical bread and butter issues. It's also notable as well, I mean, the diversity within the team in terms of gender, and also the fact that we now have 3 openly LGBT MLAs in Northern Ireland for the first time. So that's, again, a reflection of the true reality of Northern Ireland. Now, I think our vote sends a very powerful statement that people want delivery on the bread and butter issues. The cost of living crisis has to be addressed, and we also have...
And not a border poll.
Well, a border poll. I don't think that this election brings a border poll any further or stops the debate from happening. That debate will happen in parallel. I don't think it's not the core issue at the moment.
Well, you have a wish list, and you had a very expansive party manifesto. Okay, but it's not going to amount to anything unless you can get the DUP to go back in.
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, if you look back to December 2019 and the general election, the Alliance success then sent a very important signal with the return of devolution through New Decade, New Approach. Once again, that voice has to be listened to today. It's also a voice for reform of the structures of the Assembly. Designations are now completely outmoded. That needs to change. We also may need to look at how we form a government. It's not tolerable to have a situation where previously Sinn Féin stood back for 3 years, and today the DUP are stepping back. A majority of people yesterday across a range of parties voted for devolution. They also voted for pragmatism on the protocol, not a counterproductive standoff.
All right. Shortly we will be joined by John O'Dowd by Zoom. But before we do that, John Stewart, I just wonder whether the Ulster Unionist Party now, because you're down to single figures.
It wasn't a good election for the Ulster Unionist Party, Paul, but it wasn't a bad one. I mean, we dropped by just over a percentage point with nearly 100,000 votes. Yes, we lost my party colleague Roy Beggs in East Antrim, and that was disappointing. Roy had been there from 1998 and was one of the first original intake. But we went within touching distance. 95 votes have taken a 10th seat up in Foyle, and Ryan McCready pulled very well there.
So what happened to the BD bounce?
Well, as Matthew said, we get squeezed on the other side, and I have to say I fought a very, very positive campaign, as did the party, and my vote increased significantly.
But your vote management was not there.
Well,
it wasn't there. You look at some of the constituencies where you fielded 2 candidates and came back with one of which was East Antrim.
Absolutely. I mean, it was always going to be difficult to hold 2 in East Antrim. We had about 22% of the vote last time. We've increased it. But the fact is, the margins just weren't there to hold on to the 2nd seat, and that is disappointing. The fact is that we're getting squeezed. I lost track of the amount of doors that we knocked where people said to me, John, I would love to vote for you. Thank you for helping me on this issue, but I can't on this occasion because I have to vote for the DUP to keep Sinn Féin out. That is a consistent message. The fear tactics, it comes up time and time.
So you need to harden your stance then?
It's not about hardening a stance. Our approach is about progressive and positive politics, and that is the message and the campaign that we tried to run.
John O'Dowd joins us. John O'Dowd, thank you very much indeed this Sunday afternoon for taking part in the discussion. We've been hearing from Jonathan Buckley, from Stephen Farry, Matthew O'Toole and from John Stewart. We're now about to hear from Sinn Féin. Is there a smile on your face this Sunday lunchtime?
No, I've listened to the commentary there from Jonathan Buckley, and I think, like many in the population, I am shocked that days after an election, there is a political party refusing to accept the democratic outcome of that election. The DUP clearly have a mandate, but it's quite clear that over 75% of those people who went out to vote voted for parties that want to see a return of the executive and the power sharing institutions.
Yes. And John O'Dowd, yes, that's a given, and I understand that. And we've been having a conversation around the table here about how the politicians can help parties like the DUP to get in there again. What can Sinn Féin do?
Well, no, Paul, with the greatest respect, it's now up to the DUP to help the people. Political parties have had their say. We have put our positions to the people, and the people have spoken. And now it is up to the political parties to return to the Assembly and to the Executive and help them with the cost of living crisis, to help them with the crisis in the health service, and to start turning round our public services.
But you know
That's what needs to be done.
that won't happen.
This isn't about an ego trip for the DUP.
John, but you know that will not happen this side of there being the removal of or moving from the protocol.
Why, Paul?
Because the DUP have said so.
Paul, we're now being held to ransom by 20% of the electorate. Is that acceptable in a democracy? The protocol isn't the problem. The response of the DUP to the protocol is the problem. That is the fundamental problem. And when people talk about issues being resolved around the protocol, Paul, there are factories being built in my constituency as a result of the protocol. There are warehouses being built. There are jobs being created in my constituency and in everyone's constituency as a result of the protocol. So let's approach this in a balanced and reasonable manner.
Well, why don't you then? Well, then surely, as a fellow politician, what you must do is to try and get that message out there to the DUP.
Well, I think the DUP have heard it quite clear. The DUP have a number of issues which they need to resolve themselves. Firstly, they need to respect the democratic outcome of this election, and they need to accept this fundamental principle that nationalists and Republicans are as entitled to the First Minister's role as anyone else. That's a democratic principle. They need to accept that the power-sharing institutions of the Good Friday Agreement are in the hands of the people. And the people have spoken. They have come out and voted in overwhelming numbers for parties that want to see the executive and the power-sharing institutions return. And while clearly there are many unionists who have concerns about the protocol, it's quite clear that the Assembly or the Executive can resolve those issues.
Right.
But if we had the First and Deputy First Minister in place, both of those, Michelle and whoever the DUP nominate, would be able to attend meetings of the joint working group, which is built into the protocol, and discuss the issues directly with the British government and the European Union.
All right.
So there are issues that can be resolved, but let's not go down this route.
Okay.
The DUP need help. The DUP need to help people.
John O'Dowd, thank you very much indeed for that. The DUP needed to help people. I just wonder, will there be any common ground in a conversation that would take place between yourself and John O'Dowd? Not least because you're both representing the same constituency as well.
Well, I think what needs to be called out, Paul, and I'm sad that this narrative hasn't been called out by elements of the media, but there's significant revisionism going on within Sinn Féin. Firstly, on the need to get back into government. This is a party, and which John is part of, which kept government down in Northern Ireland for over 3 years. Second point, when we talk about the
was past, that was the history.
No, but
we are where we are right now, yes. And surely everybody, even Sinn Féin in this, and I hope the DUP, would love to be moving forward.
Yes, context is important, Paul. The final point on that, on real bread and butter issues. When the reforms came in for our health service, Bengoa report, Michelle O'Neill was the health minister of the day. She left that report sitting on the shelf for over 3 years.
But she's not here to defend herself on that.
Well,
I mean,
it's important that
no. We do need to move on from that particular issue. But I mean, sitting in the sidelines, is that where the SDLP is going to be from here on in?
Well, I mean, elections have consequences, Paul. Our vote has gone down. The number of representatives we have in Stormont has gone down. So yes, that will mean that we have less of a voice. We were very clear before the election that we wanted more SDLP MLAs and more SDLP ministers. That has happened. Does that mean that we don't have a voice?
Would you get a seat in government?
I don't think we would, because I don't think we'll meet the threshold under D'Hondt. I haven't done the exact maths, but I think we will have 8 MLAs, and I don't think that will entitle us to a ministry. Does that mean that we won't have a voice at Stormont? Absolutely, it won't. I will just say this, Paul, and I'm being upfront about how bad a day this was for the SDLP. We lost 30% of our representatives, actually more than 30%, a full third of SDLP MLAs were lost at the election. So in a sense, what happened was we didn't have 3 years of government from 2017. We then had two very difficult years with the pandemic, some of which was very mismanaged. It looks like the SDLP has been held most accountable. I don't think that's necessarily what the electorate wanted, but it does have consequences. We will be using our voice to hold the parties that were successful to account for how well they delivered government.
The electorate has spoken. You can't argue with that.
Well, I just acknowledge that the electorate has spoken, Paul. We'll be using the voice that we have to hold those parties that have been more successful at the election to account.
Okay. Stephen Farry, how many seats do you reckon you'll get in government now?
Well, I think potentially we may get two under the hunt, but I mean, at the moment, sadly, it's a bit of an academic discussion until we have assurances that a government can be put in place. Let me be very clear. We can walk and chew gum in Northern Ireland at the same time. We must set that government up in the coming days and get on with the cost of living crisis and addressing what's happening with our health service. At the same time, we can push for necessary reforms to the institutions. And in terms of what the DUP are talking about, the protocol, I think all of us recognise that there are challenges with the protocol, but it's there for particular reasons due to the choices made around the nature of Brexit. We have to mitigate it as far as we can, but we have to do it in a spirit of realism, not chasing unicorns. And I think any notion of the UK and EU ending up in further confrontation makes life even more difficult to find that way forward. But if the DUP want to work with us, at the same time as they form a government, we perhaps can make progress on these issues.
I want to bring John Stewart in this. John, what's your diary looking like for tomorrow?
Our party MLA team will be meeting tomorrow morning, and we will be discussing everything that's happened over the weekend. There'll probably be a post-election review, and then I'm getting stuck back into the constituency work that I've been continuing to do for the last 5 years. I hope this week that we will be signing in as MLAs, and I hope that we can work to get an executive formed. I agree that the protocol has to go, but we have to get an executive re-established, and we have to start tackling the issues that matter for people here in Northern Ireland.
Jonathan Buckley, Stephen Farry, Matthew O'Toole, John Stewart, and indeed John O'Dowd, thank you all very much indeed. We'll have full analysis from our political editor Tracy McGee and the commentators John Tong and Suzanne Breen shortly. Do stay with us.